Watergate, one of the most significant moments in American political history. The break-in at the Watergate Hotel and subsequent presidential cover-up was a watershed moment for its generation, birthing a wave of paranoia and cynicism, an atmosphere of mistrust that perhaps ultimately led to the mainstreaming of modern conspiracy theories. It inspired books, television and films, and changed the lexicon of the English language. US President Richard Nixon remains, as of 2022, the only president to resign from office. And the legacy of his presidency, which saw the forced desegregation of a racist school system, the Apollo 11 moon landing, the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency, and the signing of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, is indelibly linked with the Cloak and Dagger operation and his overreach in attempting to silence investigation into it. And yet, there was a chance it may never have happened at all. Had the Nixon camp followed through on some of their earlier plans, there would have been no need for Watergate, no resignation, no air of doubt and distrust, no upheaval of American politics. This is the story of Operation Sandwedge, the pre-Watergate conspiracy that never came to pass. The path leading to Watergate, Sandwedge, and all of Tricky Dick's campaign tactics began several years earlier. Nixon stood for the 1960 presidential election as the incumbent vice president under Dwight Eisenhower. He lost a close election to his rival, John F. Kennedy, with some states decided by a margin of as few as 4,500 votes. Theodore H. White, a journalist and historian known for his election coverage, traces Nixon's obsession with securing every possible vote to this fine margin, although his subsequent loss in the 1962 California gubernatorial election, and his insistence afterwards that a media environment he perceived as biased against him would no longer have Nixon to kick around anymore, no doubt also factored into his hunger for approval, as did the razor-fine margin of victory in his successful 1968 election as president. Although Nixon carried 32 states in that election, his lead in the popular vote nationwide was a mere 0.7%. And so, in the lead-up to his re-election campaign for 1972, no punches would be pulled. Leading up to the election, Nixon's White House staff and his campaign group, the Committee to Re-elect the President, began researching what they called political hardball, or a more underhanded suite of strategies in addition to the usual political campaigning. Nixon's chief of staff was the stoic H.R. Haldeman, who together with his colleague John Ehrlichman, a domestic affairs assistant for the president, had been dubbed the Berlin Wall. The pair gained this nickname for their tendency to isolate Nixon from outside intervention, presenting a line of defence between the president and those who sought to question him. Haldeman oversaw the planting of rumours and false information in the media about Nixon's political rivals, and his office also compiled regular intelligence reports on political enemies, using information taken from the police and the FBI. It was in this environment of espionage, intelligence, and political hardball that the seeds of Operation Sandwedge germinated. Ehrlichman had employed a staffer named Jack Caulfield, a former New York police officer, who presented the Nixon campaign with a plan to expand their surveillance operations. Reports on Caulfield's exact motives at this point are conflicting. Some sources indicate he intended to set up a private investigation agency which would specialise in espionage and black bag operations, and felt his connections with the Nixon camp would be an opportunity to secure an influential and high-profile client with which to launch such a business. While others state that the private investigation angle was merely a cover story, a front through which to launder election campaign funds and justify his setting up of offices and hiring of staff. Regardless of which of these you believe, Caulfield began working for Nixon in earnest, soon involving himself in the installation of wiretaps on several of Nixon's enemies' phone lines. Caulfield's next step was to prepare a dossier outlining his proposal for Operation Sandwedge, so named by the golf enthusiast Caulfield for the ability of a sandwedge club to rescue a golf ball from precarious ground. Caulfield's 12-page proposal outlined a plan to provide security for the Republican National Convention, to investigate Nixon's enemies, and to set up electronic surveillance, and called for a budget of just over $500,000, a sum equivalent to $3.5 million in today's currency. Caulfield modelled his proposals on the work of Intertel, a private investigative firm created by staff who had served under the former Democratic Attorney General Robert Kennedy, which he assumed would be employed by the Democrats in the coming election. To this end, Sandwedge detailed plans to surveil political rivals illegally, either through electronic means or through black bag burglaries to obtain sensitive material on their targets. The aim was to secure information on their subjects' tax histories, sex lives, and any other personal material which could be used as leverage against them. To this end, Caulfield prepared a number of staff, including employees of the Internal Revenue Service and members of law enforcement. In addition to the Democratic Party offices, Sandwedge targets also included fellow Republican Paul McCloskey, an anti-Vietnam War politician who opposed Nixon's nomination for the 1972 election, as well as the wider anti-war movement, journalist and political speechwriter Joseph Kraft, and even Nixon's own brother Donald. Also considered was an attack on the office of the Brookings Institution, a Washington DC based think tank which had been critical of Nixon's presidency. Operation Sandwedge was soon abandoned, however, in favour of alternative proposals. Another member of the re-election campaign, the former FBI agent G Gordon Liddy, had prepared his own proposal, a multifaceted operation named Operation Gemstone, which called for all of the elements of Sandwedge, in addition to honeypot traps to ensnare rivals in compromising positions, and the forcible breaking up of anti-war and anti-Nixon protests. Liddy's plan was over-ambitious and would be scaled down before being approved, but appears to have been chosen ahead of pressing forward with the Sandwedge plan due to a general dislike of Caulfield in the re-election camp. Nixon's legal counsel John Dean has specified that it was Caulfield and not his plan that was ultimately rejected, and it seems that the blue-collar Irish-American former cop had no real allies in the college-educated Anglo-Saxon environment of the Nixon camp. Upon the rejection of Sandwedge in favour of the revised Gemstone plan, Caulfield was shuffled out into a job with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, and one of his former staffers, hired under the Sandwedge plan, was given a greater role in the Gemstone operation, James W. McCord Jr. McCord's first activity under Liddy's new strategy was to plant electronic surveillance in the hotel complex used for the Democratic Party convention, a hotel named the Watergate. McCord's arrest, along with those of his colleagues in the field operation, led to the eventual downfall of Nixon's presidency and the conviction of 48 men who were involved in the operation and its cover-up. Among those who were not convicted, however, was Jack Caulfield, the man whose plan had been abandoned. Without the cancellation of Sandwedge, there would have been no G Gordon Liddy, no James McCord in position of power. Nixon's hands would not have been clean by any means, but there is no telling what would have been uncovered, or what would have gone unseen, undetected and unpunished in the coming years. Had Nixon's camp carried out Sandwedge's proposals, today's political landscape may well be unrecognisable, the name Watergate unknown to the world.
Sock it to me?